Hello, my name is Dr. Hilary Bowers. I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health Services with Children's Primary Care Medical Group, CPCMG. We serve children and adolescents across San Diego and Riverside counties. And it is my pleasure to be here to share some of the tips with you that I also share with my patients and families. So I know a lot of families are struggling right now with change. There have been a lot of changes. Kids are out of school, parents are out of work, people spending more time at home, which should be a great joy, but also is a big change. And learning how to deal with the stress of change is a challenge that I can talk about with my families. One thing I do talk about is you can only make about 1 to 2 changes a month and have them really stick. And you can pick a change that is easy to make, or you can pick a change that you think has the most impact. Often families like to start with the one that has the most impact because they want to just get moving and get going. I often recommend staying with what is the easiest change that you can make as a family? What's the easiest change that your child, when I'm talking to parents, that their child can make and really be successful? When you make a little change and a little change and a little change, next thing you know, when you're looking back, you've made a whole mountain of changes. If you do one healthy change a month, that equals 12 for the calendar year. And so one step at a time to really make that big mountain. A few things I like to talk about are what are things you can do anywhere, anytime, any place. I like to think that we all carry an imaginary toolbox with us, kind of strapped on. And when we're in a stressful moment, we can start pulling things out. And if somebody's only tool is to scream or yell or, punch a pillow, that isn't going to be as successful as if they have A to Z and have, 26 different items that they can pull out of their toolbox. So 3 things that I think about that you can do anywhere, anytime, any place are conscious breathing, color visualization, and painting your happy place. So conscious breathing is you breathe in through your nose, hold it, breathe out through your mouth. And so some people may think of this as box breathing. If you play a wind instrument, you want to breathe out longer than you breathe in. I've found that this is often a favorite item for stress reduction for parents, but for my patients, their children, sometimes they don't really like it. So even though we all as humans are breathing all the time and it's something we can carry with us, remember part of this is finding what works for you. What goes in your toolkit. So conscious breathing, color visualization, which is something I learned from one of my early mentors. And you imagine a circle, and I think you place a circle on your head, on your chest, on your belly. And what you start was with a red circle. So say I'm putting in my chest and imagine things that are red. So strawberries, red apples, fire engines, stop signs, roses, so things that are red. And red is often an angry color. It's very vibrant. It's very, and as you're breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, so you can pair it with the conscious breathing, then you have concentric circles that are a little bit bigger. So now I have an orange circle. The orange circle could be filled with California poppies and oranges. And then a next circle is yellow. And usually at this point, when I'm teaching my patients, whether they be in person or via telehealth, I ask the patient to give me something that's yellow. And because that way you make sure that they're engaged and that they're really listening and learning the skill that you're trying to teach them. So things that are yellow, bananas, lemons, sunflowers, sunshine, minions. That one usually gets a laugh. And then green. So the next big circle is green, like grass and clover and pine trees. Blue, like the ocean and blue jeans. And then you have purple, like eggplant, violets, sunsets. So by the time you get to purple, you have this big purple circle that's covering you, and purple is a much calmer color than red. And then you can kind of breathe out whatever that stress is that had been building up. And again, you can do it in the middle of math class, you can do it lying down on your bed, you can do it while you're taking a walk with a friend, because people don't know it's sort of what's going on in your head. So the third item is painting your happy place. What does it look like, smell like, feel like, taste like, sound like? Where would you rather be? And you can do this out loud. You can do it on a piece of paper. You can even just do it in your head And you want to be so descriptive with it that you actually are transported to that location. Because when we're thinking of a place that makes us calm, we're thinking of a place we'd rather be, decreases our heart rate, decreases our respiration rate, makes us be more in the moment. So again, we can then step forward and address any stressors that we have. So those three things are conscious breathing, painting your happy place, and color visualization. Another item, especially with the younger kids, is I'll talk about the cool down corner. So often parents are pretty familiar with timeouts, and I like to really differentiate that timeouts are discipline worthy. So your kid ran out in the middle of the street, they were playing with the heirloom, they broke it. There's something that was safety or infection control, and they violated the house rule in that way. And so that is a timeout. A timeout is something that is parent controlled and parent directed. So the child is removed. For example, say you hit your sister, no hitting, hitting hurts, you're in timeout. So very short, 6 words, you're done, you're gone, and you go to the timeout zone. And then how long the timeout is based on the kid's age. Usually say about 1 minute per age. But again, that is parent directed. Cool down time is what we do before timeout time. So this is, you're seeing your kids are starting to get a little amped up. Maybe dinner's taking a little longer than you wish it would. Everybody's hungry, starting to get a little fussy. Nothing's happened yet, but this requires you as a caregiver to make sure that you are really in tune with your children. And when it's cool down time, you say, hey, it's cool down time. And cool down time is where the child is directing it. So that means they go to the pre-designated cool down corner. And maybe there's a box or some container which has things that they can then utilize during cool down time. So it may be a pillow that they can punch. It could be some slime or silly putty. It could be a fidget, paper and crayons. If the kids are trustworthy in that age, you could have scissors or otherwise just paper and rip it up into tiny pieces. An old magazine can be useful. So maybe a fan, a pinwheel. I actually like to use pinwheels quite a bit because by making a pinwheel blow, you are forcing the person to take a big breath in and a long, slow breath out. So you're actually teaching them how to do conscious breathing without saying breathe. You're just having them use the pinwheel. So having all those things in a cool down corner, and then how long does a child stay in cool down? That's up to them. Cool down corner is all about social emotional self-regulation. And when they feel they can come out and then interact in a way that's healthy, they're allowed to come out. So if it's 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 3 hours, it's really up to them and the family. As a provider, you can educate your parents to model the behavior they want their children to do. So give an example of, say you're making dinner, the kids are starting to get a little squirrely. You can turn and say, wow, I am feeling frustrated, right? You always want to name your emotions. You can name it to tame it. If you say what you're feeling, then kids can help understand what they're feeling. So you can say, wow, I'm really frustrated. I've asked people 3 times to help set the table. Nobody started. I spent a lot of time today looking up a new recipe to make for my family. I took a lot of pride and joy in that, and I don't feel appreciated as a parent right now. I'm really frustrated. I'm going to go to cool down time. And, make sure the kitchen's safe. You've turned off the stove and oven. Nobody can get hurt. And then you make a big deal of it. You march right over to cool down time. You sit down in a chair, pick up the magazine, punch the pillow, whatever it is that's in your cool down corner, and that helps you. And you can breathe and you can huff and you can puff. And I always tell my parents, use my name, say, oh, Dr. Bowers said cool down corner is going to be really helpful. I don't know, but I'm going to try it. And so you go out and you do it. And over time, as a parent, as a caregiver, then you start slowly coming back down and you're cooling down, and maybe you're just flipping pages angrily, but over time you're like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. And you're like, hee hee, I really want to tell someone about what I just read. And then when you're done, you're like, wow, I feel so much better. I'm so glad that I took the time for myself. And then you can go out like, wow, I really feel like I want to give somebody a hug because I feel so good. Does anybody like a hug? You always want to ask permission before getting in someone else's personal bubble. You don't want to force children to hug or have physical contact if they're not open to it. So if they are, you're like, great, thank you. That hug felt so good. And if they don't want to hug, you say, that's okay. I'm going to hug myself. I'm going to give myself a high five and say, way to go, mommy. Way to go, daddy. Way to go, grandma or grandpa or auntie or uncle or whoever modeled that behavior. Thank you so much for taking the time for myself. And then you go back and you do the other activities. Often the first few times that a caregiver models this behavior, especially if it's really different, children will watch you with very big eyes. And they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And maybe they'll even approach you because children are very empathetic. They'll come over, they may pet you, they may try to give you a hug or sit close and get quiet, and they'll watch you because they're always watching you. So if you are modeling the behavior that you want them to be doing, they will be much more successful in learning those behaviors. Research in ACEs with children shows that having even one supportive adult gives them more resilience to get through whatever stressors they're living in with their life. So then I talk with my families. How can you help foster those relationships? One of the most important things for parents to think of is just listen. Just being there, just being present. Your child will come to you usually at the time that you're stressed, that you're busy, that you wish you could be going to bed, but that's the time that they really need to talk. And what they don't want, usually, especially teenagers, they don't necessarily want a quick fix. What they want is a listening ear. They want to know that they are heard, that you care about them, that you love them, and that you'll be willing to listen again in the future. So I tell my families, just listen and hear. Often by asking reflective questions, the child will come up with their own solution to their challenge. In addition, thinking about how can we connect with people outside of our household. So are we having Zoom meetings? I know in our family, we've connected with grandparents via Zoom. We actually set up with my grandfather at his retirement facility a piano concert. So my children played piano on the iPad. They had one set up on their side, and he was able to participate. He could hear their music. He could see their faces. They got to feel the joy of sharing their gift with somebody else. And so things like that, maybe connecting with the senior center in your community would be something if you don't have extended family nearby. Thinking about how we can take walks, maybe a play date on the driveway, something where, again, you can see another person, you can connect with these people. One thing we've been doing as well is baking for others. If this is something people will accept as a baked good from somebody else's home, is to do that. And then we call it sprinkling. We leave a little note and a little something, and it doesn't have to be much, but again, the children finding some way of sharing themselves and getting outside of their own head, finding purpose to their day is very important. One of the things I'd really like to convey is that the words behavioral and mental health can sound very scary and daunting. And how can I, as a general pediatrician in a busy practice, nurse practitioner, PA, social worker, teacher, who am I who's taking care of kids and adolescents across the spectrum? How can I bring something to the table as their caregiver to help them and their families cope with stress, anxiety, worry? In addition to making connections with other humans, it's also important to make a connection with yourself. And often this can be thought of under the umbrella of mindfulness. And how do we become attuned to our own emotions and learn a little more social, emotional self-regulation? One of the tools I often recommend to families is journaling. But journaling can come in a lot of different formats. There's the traditional journal, where it's what I think of as a closed journal, where you are writing your own feelings and thoughts and pictures, but then it's closed and it's kept for yourself. So it's really for your own self-reflection. I also really like recommending what I call an open journal. And this would be where the child or the parent or caregiver, one of them writes something down, because we all know our best ideas come late at night or when we're having quiet time. and we write down something or we draw a picture, and then we shut it. And you can have some families have done a mailbox, so they get to decorate that. So that's a fun arts and crafts activity to make a mailbox by your bed. And then you can write a letter to your parent or caregiver when the mood strikes you, and you put it in their mailbox. And then the parent reads it, whether it's the mail or whether it's a spiral bound notebook. Then they read it on their own time. And then they write a response. And then they give it back to the child. And the child can read it on their own time. And so this is really a wonderful thing that works across ages, because often it's very hard to say something that's very important to us, that's really deep in our sticky bits. It's hard to say it eyeball to eyeball. And so when we're able to share that with a piece of paper and then give it to our caregiver, and then the caregiver can give it back to the child or adolescent, it is something that really helps keep the conversation moving. The third way of journaling, I actually learned from one of my own patients who shared it with me. And this is what we're calling a color journal. So instead of words, we use colors. So across the top of the page or across at the front of the journal, you would do a rainbow of colors, whatever colors you want, and you assign each color a mood: happy, sad, contemplative, whatever thoughts. And then every day, and then you draw a calendar. And so every day you assign 1 or 2 colors to that day. And then at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you have a very good visual of what things were like over that past week, 2 weeks, month. And for some families, this is actually the breakthrough moment where they understand how much their child has been struggling. Because often the words maybe don't convey. We all know, especially adolescents, they want to put on a brave face. They don't want anyone to feel like anything's wrong. And they may not fully express how much they're struggling. But the color, there's no word. And it's hard to deny if blue is sad, to see a whole month of blue. And then that can then really open some doors. Then you, as their pediatrician or other doctor, be able to then help facilitate that conversation. Another thing I like to think about is language and how much language really matters. Often families will come in and, again, sort of more the traditional Western medicine model where something's broken and then it needs to be fixed. So parents will talk about their children's behavior as in, I need to fix this, which implies that their kid's broken. And I sort of reframe that and say, well, your child's not a car, it's not a bike, your child's a human. And what we have is we have a challenging behavior, and your child doesn't have the tools to really express themselves in a way that we say is healthy. So what are they doing? They may be kicking and biting other kids at school, they may be breaking toys, and the parents want to, quote, fix that negative, destructive behavior. And I like to think a little deeper. So why is the child acting this way? What can we do to give the child the tools to express themselves in a way where they can be heard and they can have their needs met? I often use sports analogies and so say, we have a bench of people around us that support us. So there's the child in the middle, and they have parents and caregivers and grandparents and extended family and teachers. And also with that, we may have the orthopedist who lives on the bench. So when we have a broken bone, we can go to them and we can get a cast. We may have a counselor that's on the bench. So when we're struggling a little bit more with our emotions, we can go to them and learn our skills of how do we express ourselves in a healthier way. And so thinking about it more as a coach and more as this is a bench, and these are lots of different people, and often our parents are our first people that we go to for help. But sometimes parents don't have all the answers, so that's why they come to their pediatrician. That's why, we go to the specialty care. And so thinking of it in that way, that we're getting coaches to learn the skills we don't have, and that we have challenges in life. And what we're looking for is ways to express ourselves in healthy, productive ways so that everyone can get what they need and be able to feel heard. So we've talked about some things such as journaling, mindfulness, being aware. So things you can do as their caregiver, things you can teach their caregiver to help them, things you can teach your patients are the following. You can teach them to keep a journal. So be that the open or closed or the color journal that we talked about earlier would be very helpful. And again, that's a concrete, actionable item that they can have and then they can take with them. Just the act of writing down the food or keeping track of your intestinal habits can really make something that seems, oh, I don't know when it happens and it seems so scary and daunting. Now there's a pattern to it. I can understand that. And often I'll tell my families, keep the journal for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and then make an appointment when you leave here today to come back and see me and bring the journal with you. And I tell them, often you're going to look at the journal, you're going to figure out the pattern yourself, you're going to be able to make the healthy changes on your own. But it's okay if you don't, because I am here as part of your journey, and I'm here and I will be here to listen.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers, for those great tips and stress mitigation strategies.